This is CNN.
A ruling on racial balance in public schools. The U.S. Supreme Court makes it easier to end some desegregation programs. And a Los Angeles police officer says he believed his life was on the line when he took part in the beating of Rodney King.
This is CNN's Prime News, taking the time to examine world events, issues, and newsmakers, with Susan Rook in Atlanta and David French in for Bernard Shaw in Washington.
Thank you for joining us. It was the U.S. Supreme Court that first paved the way for public school desegregation programs in its landmark 1954 decision, Brown versus Board of Education. But today, the High Court decided to ease requirements for ending those programs, now in effect in hundreds of school systems all across the nation. As CNN's Anthony Collins reports, the ruling stems from a case in Georgia.
In DeKalb County, Georgia, and hundreds of other public school districts around the United States, school systems no longer need to achieve full integration before they begin to end court-ordered desegregation step by step. That was the unanimous opinion of the Supreme Court. It was a ruling that could clear the way for an end to busing at some schools.
As it applies to the DeKalb County School District, it says that we have done the right thing for a number of years, that we have met the goal in student assignment, and that aspect should be behind us.
I don't think there's any question, and I think even the Supreme Court would concede that the schools in DeKalb County today are both separate and unequal. The only question in this case is, are we going to cure that situation? And the Supreme Court has left us with some rules that suggest we may be able to cure that and we may not.
The decision said DeKalb County schools are freed from court-ordered integration of student enrollment because the school had done enough to try to achieve that. It said any remaining racial imbalance in student enrollment was due to population shifts, not due to earlier illegal policies of segregation. But it also said the school district had not yet achieved integration in faculty assignments and will remain under court supervision on that score.
They need to distribute the teachers among the county, and the county's done a good job without the courts.
The government is in control of everything as it is anyway, and I think as a person, we have our rights, and we should make our own decisions without, waiting on the government to make decisions for us.
Justice Clarence Thomas, himself a product of the Georgia school system, did not take part in the 8-0 vote. He had not yet joined the court when it heard the case. The full impact is yet to be seen. While the High Court has now given a roadmap to the end of busing, the exact route that each school takes will still be up to local federal courts. Anthony Collins, CNN at the Supreme Court.
In Los Angeles, prosecutors have finished questioning police officer Lawrence Powell about his part in the beating of motorist Rodney King. The prosecution asked Powell about conversations between officers that included derogatory racial terms. The content of those conversations was barred from the court until the defense brought them up. CNN's Greg Lamont joins us now with a live update. Greg.
Well, the court has recessed for the day, but earlier this afternoon, in what could prove to be a critical mistake for his client, attorney Michael Stone, engaged in some line of questioning that eventually led to the admission of all computer messages sent and received by Officer Lawrence Powell before and after Rodney King's beating. These are messages that the prosecution maintains have racial overtones. The first message was sent 15 to 20 minutes before Rodney King's beating. It was an encounter that Officer Powell had with a black family.
So you remember this conversation, don't you?
I remember the conversation, yes.
All right. And you replied to her, sounds almost as exciting as our last call. It was right out of Gorillas in the Mist. And that's what you typed into her, isn't it?
Yes.
And she typed back, ha, 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 ha. Let me guess who be the parties. You remember that, don't you?
Yes.
And then you typed in a message to her about trying to get through the night and that you were off for 6 days and it was time for some serious bike riding. Then you typed in, good guess, didn't you?
I believe so.
Now this incident that you're referring to, this last call right out of Gorillas in the Mist, it involved a family of African Americans, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
Right. And in your description of these individuals, you called them gorillas, didn't you?
No.
Okay. Now, this call that involved these African Americans, was it in a jungle?
In a what?
A jungle.
No.
Was it at the zoo?
No.
Were there any gorillas around?
I didn't see any.
this is a movie, Gorillas in the Mist, is that correct?
Yes.
Was there any wildlife around at all during this call?
Not that I saw.
Other than just these individuals who are African Americans, is that correct?
No, I wouldn't call them wildlife.
But you referred to that call as right out of Gorillas in the Mist.
Yes.
There were no gorillas there, were there?
No, I didn't see any.
Was that movie playing on their TV when you were there?
I didn't go inside their house.
Did you see anything regarding Gorillas in the Mist while you were at that location?
Did I see anything?
Yes.
No.
But you described that call to Karina Smith as being right out of Gorillas in the Mist.
Yes, I did.
And she said, let me guess who be the parties. And you said, good guess. Says, let me guess who be the parties. Does that mean anything to you?
What do you mean by mean anything?
Well, is that the way a particular ethnic group, would that be the way they talk?
Particular ethnic group?
Yes.
None that I'm aware of.
Let's say, for example, African Americans. Do they talk like that? Who be the parties? Would that be something African Americans might say?
None that I've met.
But you replied back, good guess.
Yes.
She said, let me guess who be the parties. And you said, good guess. So you knew what she was referring to, didn't you?
I assumed what she was referring to.
And you assumed what she was referring to when she said, who be the parties. You assumed that certain ethnic groups or African Americans talk that way, don't you?
No, that's not true.
Powell's second message was sent after King's beating that read, I haven't beaten anyone like this in a long time. But Powell denied the prosecution's allegations that the word beaten meant use of excessive force. He said it was common police jargon. Greg Lamont, CNN Live, Simi Valley, California.
The Indiana Court of Appeals today refused to free Mike Tyson from prison while he appeals his rape conviction. The former heavyweight boxing champ's request for bail was denied without explanation. There's no immediate word on what his lawyers will do next. Thursday, Tyson began serving 6 years behind bars for raping a contestant in the Miss Black America beauty pageant.
Still to come on Prime News, an encouraging bit of news on economic recovery from the Commerce Department. The UN Security Council imposes sanctions on Libya, but will they have desired effect? From New York, excerpts and analysis from tonight's debate between Bill Clinton and Jerry Brown, and how a sexual abuse trial has driven a wedge between people in a closely knit North Carolina community.
Prime News is brought to you by Pip Printing for all your business printing needs.
Pip Printing suggests that before choosing a printer for your company, you take a moment to check their references. These are just a few of ours. Pip Printing. Give us a call. We'll show you why we're the biggest business printer in the world.
Welcome to McDonald's. May I take your order?
What's cooking?
Well, sir, the Wild West has returned to McDonald's.
Oh, you don't say.
So you could start the day with a hearty combination of tomatoes, peppers, and sausage in our 99-cent breakfast burrito.
Oh, no.
And stop back later for tender strips of grilled chicken with fresh tomatoes and cheese in our 99-cent chicken fajitas.
Come on, Wishbone. Hold your horses. I'm still talking to the sign.
What you want is what you get at McDonald's today.
The U.S. Postal Service will pick up 1 or 100 or 1,000 priority mail and express mail packages for just $4.50. That's per pickup, not per package. And we'll even pick up heavy ones. You'll get express mail next day and 2-day priority mail delivery at some of the lowest prices around. So call for a pickup. It's like getting a moving van for $4.50.
We deliver for you.
Now arriving, track 14.
Imagine every day, everywhere you go, with every step you take, a pillowy cushion of softness. That's Dr. Scholl's unique 2-layer air pillow insoles. 1 layer for shock, 1 for comfort. Dr. Scholl's air pillow insoles. You'll feel better when the doctor is in.
Tonight, the war hero who signed on as H. Ross Perot's presidential running mate. Plus, perk wars. Congress getting critical of the president's creature comforts. Tonight on Larry King Live, 9 Eastern on CNN.
Signs the economic recovery is taking hold. The nation's index of leading economic indicators saw a second monthly rise in February. The figures up 0.8% for February after a revised 1% gain in January. Adding to the optimism, the Conference Board, a nonprofit business group, reports consumer confidence this month showed its biggest improvement in a year. And Bush administration officials predict moderate growth for the months ahead, but they still are cautious.
The economy still has major challenges. It's in need of improvement. It's in need of improvement as rapidly and as strongly as consistent with our longer-term goals. Unemployment remains a serious issue, a serious problem. We need to get growth up so that employment will expand.
But a new unemployment report today is anything but encouraging. A Harvard University study finds those without jobs face bleak prospects of finding new work. The researchers say white-collar workers face the greatest chance in nearly 20 years of losing their jobs. This discouraging word comes on the heels of a report the government undercounted by 40% the number of people out of work early in the recession.
Another view of the U.S. economic picture comes from the National Association of Realtors. Their Housing Affordability Index shows it was a little harder for a typical family to afford to buy a home during February. Well, 5 White House officials today ignored an invitation to testify about President Bush's travel budget. While TV cameras focused on the empty chairs, a lawmaker complained that the White House spends more than twice as much as Congress on travel. Reporters asked Barbara Bush about congressional grumbling over White House spending for flowers and calligraphers. Her response, oh, baloney. The White House is run like a tight ship.
The jury in the John Gotti murder trial is ready to begin deliberations. Earlier today, the judge replaced a juror with an alternate. Sources tell CNN the juror wrote notes claiming to have seen hand signals between an FBI agent and a government witness testifying. The juror reportedly was dismissed after questioning about the notes. Sources say the government denied any improper exchanges with its witnesses. If convicted on the most serious charges, Gotti faces life in prison. In Miami, day 1 of closing arguments in the drug trial of former Panamanian leader Manuel Noriega. Prosecutors called Noriega a man of great power who, quoting now, sold his uniform, his army, his protection also, to a murderous criminal gang. Prosecutors told the jury Noriega is responsible for putting tons of cocaine on U.S. streets. The defense is expected to make its closing arguments Wednesday.
Ahead on Prime News, a United Nations action in the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103.
I feel better. I think we must do something about it.
The Security Council puts the ball in Libya's court. We'll explain.
It happens every morning in London, Paris, and Madrid, just as the city starts to stir. In Munich, Manchester, Zurich, and Brussels, just as the business day begins. In Glasgow, Stockholm, Frankfurt, and Milan, as the new day arrives, so do we. American Airlines, with more non-stops from across the U.S. to Europe than any other airline. And beginning June 8th, we'll also arrive in Berlin. So fly the one airline with more non-stops to more of Europe than anyone. American Airlines. Something special to Europe.
You always want to look your best, but the last thing you have time to do is shop. That's why there's the Spiegel catalog. It's filled with looks you love. Ralph Lauren, Calvin Klein, Liz Claiborne. And you can order 24 hours a day. We deliver to your home or office and pick up returns at no cost to you. For your new Spiegel catalog, call this toll-free number. For $5, you'll get our 500-page catalog, this elegant eyeshadow collection, and a $3 certificate toward any purchase. Spiegel accepts Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. The Spiegel catalog. It's for the woman who has everything but...
Libya tonight accuses the UN Security Council of violating international law and paving the way for attacks on Libyan cities. The council voted to impose an air and arms embargo on Libya beginning April 15th unless the country turns over 2 suspects in the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103. CNN's Jeannie Mose has more.
Colonel Gaddafi now knows how Saddam Hussein felt. Libya is being slapped with sanctions by the UN Security Council. Western diplomats call it poetic justice. Libya is accused of involvement in blowing up Pan Am 103, so the resolution calls for all countries to cut air links with Libya. Nations are also supposed to stop selling Libya weapons and reduce the number of Libyan diplomatic staff they allow in. Up in the gallery where tourists normally sit were relatives of Pan Am victims and former Pan Am employees who lost friends.
Well, today I feel better. I think we must do something about it. I sat in there and I listened to all these wonderful ambassadors from distant parts of the world. They didn't all agree, but the resolution was passed, and thank God for that.
The vote was less than overwhelming. You need 9 votes to pass a resolution. This one got 10. No one voted against, but 5 countries abstained, countries that thought imposing sanctions was too rash. But maybe with more time, Colonel Gaddafi would turn over the 2 suspects in the Pan Am bombing.
On the eve of this meeting, certain positive results were almost being produced.
Almost, but not quite. There's still time for Libya to avoid the sanctions. They don't actually go into effect until April 15th, which gives Libya about 2 weeks to turn over the suspects and renounce terrorism.
The choice is now clearly and unavoidably up to Libya.
What isn't clear is how Libya will demonstrate by concrete actions, as the resolution demands, its renunciation of terrorism. Libya's ambassador said his government has cooperated as much as it could without compromising its sovereignty, and he suggested Libya might end up under attack.
The attempt to smear my country's reputation is but paving the way to another act of aggression against peaceful Libyan cities.
As when hundreds of Libyan civilians were killed back in 1986, the ambassador said. Back then, the U.S. bombed Libya after a terrorist attack on a German discotheque where Americans hung out. Some relatives of the Pan Am victims were satisfied for the moment. Others thought the sanctions don't go far enough.
I think the key here is that the one thing that has been left out is what we need is an oil embargo. That's the key.
But an oil embargo would probably never have made it through the Security Council, so the U.S. had to settle for the isolation rather than the economic strangulation of Libya. Unless he backs down over the next 2 weeks, Colonel Gaddafi will have his wings clipped. Jeannie Mose, CNN at the United Nations.
Also today, Colonel Gaddafi offered to meet with U.S. President Bush to resolve the matter. The White House calls the suggestion nonsense. Also today, Britain charges that Libya is refusing to let some citizens from other countries leave. Britain's Foreign Office says there are complaints that Libya is denying exit visas to a number of non-Libyans. Libya denies the charges. For its part, the U.S. says it has received no complaints of Americans forced to stay.
Baghdad is stepping up attacks on Kurdish rebels in northern Iraq. Heavy artillery and thousands of troops are moving in. But Pentagon officials say they do not believe Iraq will risk another U.S. military intervention. Iraqi troops have not moved deep into the Kurdish zone running north of the Sulaymaniyah, Arbil, and Mosul arc. Planes are flying below the 36th parallel, which the U.S. says is okay. Pentagon officials say Baghdad is trying to intimidate the Kurds out of next month's self-governing elections. When Prime News returns, Bill Clinton and Jerry Brown tackle the issues in a New York debate.
Here in New York State, good times with friends.
Hey, they're special. Sometimes you wish they would never end. The care you show is just as special. Friends know when to say when.
The family of Budweiser beers is proud of all the friendships they've helped make. So when they remind you to know when to say when, it's all in the name of friendship.
Friends know when to say when.
We told our broker, we pay a lot of taxes and they're going up even more. Got any ideas?
There were so many choices. It made us look at what our needs really are.
Like monthly income.
And long-term investments. We have to think about the future.
Or something more aggressive.
Van Kampen Merritt offers a wide choice of tax-free mutual funds. Ask your investment representative for a prospectus or call 1-800-DIAL-VKM.
In just 1 year, over 5 million people have joined MCI Friends and Family.
You get the 20% savings on any phone call that you make to a member of your circle.
They joined without even knowing we would also offer big international savings and a free calling card to save them the extra 20% even on calls home. They joined without knowing of the double savings, 40% during May. You have one advantage over them. You know how good Friends and Family is before you join. Call MCI. Join the bandwagon.
On CNN tomorrow, campaign hopefuls hit New York, the city that can hit back, on Cryer and Company. Then on NewsHour, her husband's killer only served 1 month in jail. Her fight to find out why. All tomorrow on CNN.
Most of Russia's various ethnic regions agreed to stick together today. They signed a treaty spelling out their freedoms and responsibilities in a bid to head off disputes like those that led to the breakup of the Soviet Union. Russia's two biggest regions, Chechnya and Tatarstan, did not sign the pact. Tatarstan voted for statehood last week. Chechnya declared itself independent last fall. Russia learns tomorrow what help it can expect from the U.S. President Bush plans to present his Russia aid package hours before Bill Clinton's first foreign policy speech. Clinton was expected to denounce Mr. Bush for not helping Russia enough. CNN will carry the president's announcement live at 11 a.m. Eastern and provide coverage of Clinton's speech. The president's Republican challenger is criticizing efforts to bail out the former Soviet republics. Pat Buchanan says the U.S. should offer debt relief instead. In Wisconsin, Buchanan called for a protest vote in next week's primary. Tonight's political focus is on Vermont. Democrats and Republicans hold party caucuses.
Bill Clinton and Jerry Brown debated tonight in New York City. They avoided personal attacks, instead tackling the thorny problems that plague urban America, issues such as crime and drugs.
How would you tackle the problem of ridding the streets of our city and of Los Angeles and other cities of the illegal guns that end up so very often in the hands of young children in schools?
One thing you can do is you can put a limit to the suggestion of having a moratorium on the sale of guns. Try that and see if it'll put a stop to it. I signed a waiting bill requiring a 15-day waiting period. I signed a bill as governor requiring a mandatory prison sentence for anyone who uses a gun in the commission of a crime. But let's face it, guns, crime, crack, they're all the function of mounting inequality, despair, and degradation that can only be stopped when we galvanize the moral force that will rededicate us to the investment in each and every family so there will be an adequate income security. And that has to be a job. It has to require the looking from far away, right here at home where the real challenge is. And I think all these issues resolve themselves to that one issue of creating the opportunity for every family.
Governor Clinton.
I think you should pass the Brady bill, and then I think there should be a nationwide attempt to engage the young people of our country in these massive gun buyback programs. I think that incentives should be offered. I think that there should be a challenge. I also think we should stiffen the security around our schools and start making even more stringent efforts to collect dangerous guns when they're in the possession of young people. This is not an easy answer, but it's a very difficult problem. Finally, I think that you can't blame the national culture on everything. I think we're going to have to change a lot of this neighborhood by neighborhood, school by school, family by family. It's going to take a lot of concerned and committed adults working on this effort. What I think we need to do is to beef up the traditional sources of restraint, the Coast Guard, the Border Patrols, the Customs Service. We need to become much better at monitoring the flights into this country. And then we need to work much more closely with those governments that are making a good faith effort. I wouldn't be opposed to taking action against a government that obviously was not trying. But those which are, we have to try to deal with. You can't get out of the fact that with 5% of the world's population, we're consuming 50% of the world's drugs. Most of the problem is here at home.
Governor Brown. Well, we got a $10 billion drug war. Mr. Noriega, who was fronting for the Colombian cartel, was getting money from the federal government, the CIA, because he was helping with the war against the people in Nicaragua. So I don't think the administration has been very straight in its commitment to really eradicating drugs. And the way you eradicate it is to take away the rationale and the reason for drug dependency. And I'll come back to this over and over again. There is a clear way in which we can reduce drug dependency, and that is to give every child the rich opportunity of growing up in a family where there's income security. And a nation of $6 trillion can do that if its leadership will just stand up and do the right thing.
Joining us now from New York to analyze the candidates' answers are CNN national political correspondent Gene Randall and Susan Page, a national political correspondent for Newsday. Welcome to both of you. Gene, let's start with you. Before we talk about content, let's talk about the political process. Why are there so many debates now?
Well, Susan, I think it's clear that Bill Clinton and his advisors have decided this is absolutely necessary. The poll numbers, including their own, are not very good in the state. They show a very close race with Jerry Brown. And this is called the new Clinton offensive, going directly to the voters of New York by way of debates.
Jerry Brown calls it a cop-out, says that if he were really in the front, that there's no way that he would be doing these debates.
Well, I think Brown has a point. I mean, this is a bold strategy by the Clinton campaign. It also carries with it an element of risk, because Clinton is giving Jerry Brown the kind of platform in New York he could only dream about just a few days ago. And I thought Brown came off pretty well tonight. Susan?
You know, it reminded me a little of the 1980 presidential race when President Carter's people thought it would be just great if they could only get this Ronald Reagan character in a debate. They would show how old and out of touch and incompetent he was, when in fact the debates that year served to help Reagan overcome the perception that he was not quite up to the job of president. It really didn't work out that way. But you know, I don't think Governor Clinton has much of a choice in this matter, because he has two foes in this primary. One is Jerry Brown, but the other is Bill Clinton, and the perception that he's doesn't have the honesty and the integrity to be president of the United States. And by putting himself in 6 debates in 6 days, I think he hopes to convince New Yorkers that he is a man of character who can be trusted with that high office.
But he's only got like 25% to 30% on approval ratings of things like honesty, integrity, family, that kind of thing. Are these debates liable to change anybody's mind on those key character issues?
It's a terrible dilemma. How do you convince somebody who doesn't know you very well that you have good character? I think it's one of the toughest things a political figure can do. But I don't see what his alternative is. Certainly his only shot at convincing people is to make them feel a little more comfortable with him. You know, he's got some cultural ground to make up here, too. This is New York, and it's a place that has not been very hospitable to Southern politicians. Jimmy Carter lost here in 1980. 4 years ago, Tennessee Senator Albert Gore got only 10% of the vote in the New York primary. Clinton has got to make New Yorkers think that he is a more familiar figure and a more trustworthy one, and I think they figured that these debates are the best way to do that.
Gene, they appear to be rising above the level of personal attacks that we've seen in the last, certainly several weeks. Is that one of the reasons why?
Well, Susan, each one of those men tried to act presidential tonight and try to give the people of New York the impression that he is qualified to be president. So I think you'll probably see more of that in these debates.
Next, the Democratic candidates talk about health care and taxes.
I hope we get a chance to debate Jerry's tax, because I agree with the New York Daily News columnist who said it was the biggest ripoff of working people in the history of American politics. And it's a terrible idea, but
we will hear more from tonight's Democratic debate and more from our analysts in just a moment.
You make my point here. The concern of
good times with friends, hey, they're special. Sometimes you wish they would never end. The care you show is just as special. Friends know when to say when.
The family of Budweiser beers is proud of all the friendships they've helped make. So when they remind you to know when to say when, it's all in the name of friendship.
Friends know when to say when.
CNN gives you more than breaking news. When we investigate a story, we dig deep. exposing misuse of American international aid, revealing Eastern Europe's hopes and fears. Our comprehensive, in-depth reporting takes you beneath the surface, beyond the headlines, uncovering covert government operations, cracks in our educational system, famine in Africa. So for hard-hitting investigations that tell the whole story and nothing less, turn to CNN.
Prime News continues, followed by Larry King Live after this local commercial break. Next on CNN.
Hi, I'm Max Holmes. My father told me that when people buy cars, they want the best price, and after the sale, they want the best service. We've sold tens of thousands of cars, all at the best price, and we've built the largest, best-equipped service facilities in the Midwest. So if you aren't happy with the deal we offer, or the service work we do for you, call me. We'll work it out. The best price and the best service, it's all here, just the way my father would have done it.
Talking sports at Kinley's.
I love my clubs, so when I broke the driver, I thought, there goes my game, but Kinley's Repair Shop made it as good as new. Thanks, Kinley's.
Kinley's Golf and Sports Center has been giving Central Iowa personal service and the best in sports equipment and clothing since 1954. Kinley's Golf and Sports Center on Fleur Drive across from the airport.
This is CNN.
More now from tonight's debate between Bill Clinton and Jerry Brown. In New York City, the candidates were asked about their plans for health insurance. They also talked about taxes.
Should the squeaky AIDS wheel be getting the grease before there's a universal and equal access to medical care?
Well, I believe that AIDS has reached almost epidemic proportions in many of our cities, including this one. And I think that is a false choice. People are dying of AIDS out there, and the cost of the AIDS problem should be borne as a part of a national health plan. My wife was the chairman of the board of the Children's Defense Fund for a long time. I believe in primary and preventive health care. I have said we can have no national health care program without it. I believe in reestablishing neighborhood clinics. I believe in education and preventive programs in the schools, but I also believe in dealing with AIDS. We shouldn't force ourselves to choose. We're wasting $100 billion a year today on outrageous insurance structures, healthcare bureaucracies, and government regulations unrelated to healthcare. Let's take that money and take care of AIDS and primary and preventive healthcare.
Governor Brown. Governor Brown.
Well, I think you make my point here. The concern about AIDS is because of a powerful concern on the part of people with some clout and who are articulate. And certainly we need the same kind of commitment to cure cancer, to cure the diseases of poor people. But that's the point. Unless you can mobilize the political will by challenging this corrupt status quo, this governing elite that doesn't get it, that thinks they can keep talking about issues while millions of people suffer, we're never going to get anywhere. I mean, the health lobbyists, the insurance companies, and the drug manufacturers, they're giving $30 million every 2 years to the Congress to keep it the way it is. We got to understand health as a right of every citizen from the day they're born, not as a commodity to be played with for profit. And if every other major country can do it, we can do it.
The problem is with a 13% flat tax and a 13% national value-added tax, which is a sales tax business will pass on to people like they do in every country. They pass the value-added tax on. According to the Citizens for Tax Justice and the press that's analyzed it, you're going to increase taxes on the working poor with the two taxes together. You're going to increase taxes on the middle class. You're going to have, yet again, lower taxes on the wealthy. I'd get a tax cut out of it, and people that really make money in the 80s, they're going to get a killing out of it. It removes the deductibility for state and local income taxes, costs New York $4 billion, ends the Social Security Trust Fund, putting those funds into the budget with other things, runs a $180 billion extra deficit. So you have to go to 16 and 16 to get as much money as you're raising now. And if you replace the $500 billion in health insurance, that's another 8 and 8, or 24 and 24. If the people want it, they can have it, but it's a ripoff.
Thank you, Governor Clinton.
I gotta just say,
and Governor Brown.
Wait a minute.
Governor Brown, we have to go. That ends our question and answer.
I got to at least say, if that were true, I'd be concerned true. I'd be concerned also, but it's not true.
Governor Brown, there will be closing statements for this.
It's a tax on business,
we will have
not on poor people.
Let's go back to our analysts in New York to talk about some of these answers. CNN's Gene Randall and Newsday's Susan Page. Gene, let's talk about tactics. Clinton is changing tactics, and now he's really downplaying the importance of New York.
Well, as a matter of fact, a Clinton campaign advisor told me today that he used the language of New Hampshire. He said Clinton would fight like hell between now and the primary in New York next Tuesday. At the same time, while 4 or 5 days ago, these advisors were saying Jerry Brown had to win in New York to keep his momentum going, now what they're saying, they're shifting the emphasis. They're saying, well, you know, a front-runner always loses a primary or 2 or 3 late in the campaign. I think rhetorically they're setting the stage for a disappointment here in New York.
Susan?
I think it's hard for them to spin this not as a critical primary for them. If Governor Clinton wins the New York primary and wins it pretty well, it seems to me then we're back to the point where we were after Illinois and Michigan, where he seemed to be the presumptive nominee and he's beginning to get a really high total of convention delegates. But if he loses, I think there is the prospect that this whole thing gets tossed open, and Democrats who are really determined to take this White House back from George Bush and the Republicans are going to start looking around and seeing if the process can be opened up for some other nominee.
Clinton is clearly outdistancing Jerry Brown in the number of delegates, and yet this is now perceived as a very tight race.
Well, you know, it's a tight race here in New York, and I think the real effect here would be a psychological effect that might not redound to Jerry Brown's long-term credit, but could really hurt Bill Clinton if he were to lose in this state. I think that's the importance. And let me just bring up one point. Jerry Brown is meeting on Sunday, or rather, Bill Clinton is meeting on Sunday in Albany with Mario Cuomo. We think it's going to be Sunday. And yet Cuomo today made a reference to Slick Willie. I mean, what's going on here, Susan?
Well, you know, Governor Cuomo is one of the more interesting politicians in American history, I think. And he doesn't say things, he's a very precise speaker. I mean, he says what he means, so we assume he meant to say this. It's a blow to Clinton. Clinton and he have a history of bad feelings. They've had a series of, you know, kind of public tiffs over things. And this is bad news for Bill Clinton.
And yet that also, Susan, points up to the character problem, if you will, of Bill Clinton. Is he the best possible candidate, despite the fact that he is the lion's share of the delegates now at the halfway count? Is he the best possible candidate to put up against an incumbent president?
Well, he's not a Washington insider, that's his advantage, but there's an accumulation of charges here that are going to make kind of a rich target, I think, for the Republicans in the fall.
Newsday's Susan Page and CNN's Gene Randall, thank you both. David?
And when Prime News continues, a North Carolina town waits for a verdict which will end a trial but cannot erase the memories of a case that divides their community still.
Education, it affects all of us.
You need an education to get through life, period. So many kids get lost.
Right now, IBM is working with school systems across America. We're donating equipment, volunteering time to tutor students, and creating new ways for computers to help teachers teach and better prepare young people for the world they're about to inherit.
I'm not without hope.
It's only natural that children look to their parents for answers. So to help you explain why some things that may be fine for adults aren't right for children, Anheuser-Busch offers Family Talk, free advice from professionals to use with your kids while they're still learning to be grown up. And their favorite teacher is you. Let's stop underage drinking before it starts.
For those of you who have been reluctant to wear a hearing aid, Miracle Ear has more great news. If you have trouble